Hi there. I wrote an in-depth guide on how to make a Pathfinder character a few years ago, and since we're all stuck in lockdown, I thought I might as well make an audio version of that guide to throw up on my YouTube page in case any of my players are having trouble with character creation. This isn't going to be an exhaustive guide, nor is this going to go into super heavy detail. My expectation is you guys know absolutely nothing about making a character and are simply jumping into Pathfinder, trying to learn the basics. I'll link the written version of this guide in the description down below if you'd like to follow along. And as a result, without any further ado, Player's Handbook Abridged, aka how to go from knowing basically nothing to having a functional character sheet in about 30 minutes or so, hopefully. So the first thing you're going to need to do if you'd like to make a Pathfinder character is, of course, get yourself a character sheet like I'm showing here. This is a piece of paper that you record basically every aspect of your character onto it. It is what defines your character, and it's going to be changing a lot over your character's life. This is why the game is often referred to as a pencil and paper game, as opposed to like a pen and paper game. You're going to be doing a lot of erasing on your character sheet. If you don't know where to find a character sheet or what format to use, Google is a great place to start. Some of them are PDFs you can simply download and fill out onto your computer, while others you'll need to print out, fill in by hand, pencil, and paper. Alternatively, feel free to use one of the many online character sheet hosting services out there, RPG Crossing, Mythweavers, and the like. Many of these websites will require you to make an account or sign up first, but they often do a lot of the simple math for you, such as automatically filling in bonuses where relevant and being easily shareable among your D&D group. Honestly, pick the format that fits for you. You probably don't want to show up to a physical game with a digital character sheet, nor do you want to have a physical character sheet if your game is going on online, but honestly do whatever works well for you and your group. For the sake of explanation, I'm going to assume you're using the Mythweavers template that I've got up right here. It's what's worked for me and my players in the past. So once you've gotten yourself a character sheet, first thing first is to decide what the heck kind of character you're playing. Pathfinder is a role playing game, so half the fun is deciding who or what you want to play as. You can literally play as yourself in the fantasy world. Maybe you got sucked through some weird time travel portal. I don't know. Maybe you want to role play as a famous fictional character. I've had plenty of players base their character off of Legolas or Harry Potter or something along those lines. Most of the time, however, your character is going to be someone you have made up yourself. You don't need to know everything about your character before you start, mind you, but having a basic idea from the get go is usually a good idea. And once you have that idea in place, the first thing you can get onto is your ability score. There are 6 ability scores. There is Strength, Dexterity, Constitution, Intelligence, Wisdom, and Charisma. And these define your character. They will range on a score, at least during character creation, of 3, which is the absolute lowest of low, to 18, which is basically a walking demigod, with a 10 being the average. And these ability scores are the backbone of your character, and each of them will benefit you in different ways. Your strength score will measure your muscle mass. Higher strength impacts how strong you are, obviously, but also how much you can carry, how hard you can swing a greatsword, that kind of thing. Your dexterity score measures agility, as well as hand-eye coordination, shooting a bow, picking a lock, acrobatics, that kind of crap. 3, your constitution score is your toughness and is exclusively used for your health. It does not control any skills, but as a general rule, a character with a low constitution is not going to survive that long out in the wild. 4, intelligence is your book learning. This is the stuff you were taught in school. This is your memorization ability, your facts, your figures, your scientific knowledge, your general knowledge of various skills and trades. It is also a rough estimate of your magical ability, assuming you are of the wizarding sort. Wisdom is your understanding of things. This is your common sense. This is your empathy, your listening to people skills, your ability to understand social cues. And this helps define spiritual characters such as druids or clerics or rangers. Your charisma score defines your ability to interact with other people. I've heard this referred to as your sexiness score. This is your ability to tell a convincing lie, your attractiveness, your force of personality, and like how forceful you are, which is what affects sorcerers and bards and that general school of magic. I've had a few people had trouble understanding the difference between intelligence, wisdom, and charisma. So, like for example, a Buddhist monk probably is that's the type of person who has a very high wisdom, maybe average intelligence, below average charisma. Your politician is probably going to be pretty average in the wisdom department, very charismatic, might not be all that intelligent. Or if there's like a autistic savant out there who is incredibly intelligent but not very good in the wisdom and charisma department. There is a million and one ways to generate ability scores. Most common way I found to generate ability scores is either picking from a set array or rolling for ability scores. If you don't happen to have dice with you right now, or you're in a hurry, you can use what is called the Elite Array, which is what I normally use for generating NPCs on the fly, and what I've used for Maximilian right here. The array there is, you have 6 numbers. There is 15, 14, 13, 12, 10, and 8. For those of you with dice, the standard method of rolling is to roll a 6-sided die. You roll it 4 times, you discard the lowest, and you add the resulting die together. So if you rolled 6, 4, 2, 3, you'd throw away the 2, you'd add 6, 4, 3, you'd have a 13. Do that 5 more times, those are your ability scores. This will obviously give you a number between 3 or 18, no matter how high you roll. When we write this down, we would write this as 4d6. So in the role-playing game world, this is known as dice notation, which is essentially a fancy way of writing dice onto a piece of paper. So if you see 2d10, that means roll 2 10-sided die and add them together. Or 3d4 means roll 3 4-sided die and add them together. Or you may see modifiers added to die. So if you see 2d6 plus 2, that means roll 2 6-sided die and add them together. Or possibly if you're dealing with magical enchantments, you may see additional die. So if your barbarian's damage is 1d12 plus 1d6 plus 6, that means roll a 12-sided die, roll a 6-sided die, add 6, and add everything together. That is really about as complicated as it gets, however. You will never need to multiply or divide dice. It's usually just adding or subtracting numbers from the total. Alright, so once you have your ability scores, you head on over to your character sheet, and you plug those ability scores into your character sheet in any order you desire. Higher scores are obviously better. Where you put your ability scores determines what type of character you're going to end up playing, so choose it wisely. Though at the same time, don't spend too much time worrying about it. A story about a terribly clumsy thief is often just as interesting as a story about a super nimble thief. So for the sake of example, and to help you follow along, this is a character I made using these methods, known as Maximilian. The idea I was thinking for this character is that he is going to be a warrior type, but he'll have a sweet charm as well. So using the above array, I decided to plug in a 15 into his strength, or 15 into his strength, a 13 into his dex, a 12 into his constitution, a 10 into his intelligence, a wisdom into an 8 into his wisdom, and a 14 into his charisma. Now you may be wondering why exactly I have a 15 here written down for his dexterity, and I will get to that in a second. So since I planned for Maximilian here to be a warrior type, I decided to put his highest score into strength. His next highest score, which was the 14, I threw that into charisma because I think that helps represent the personality I want to put into this character. I then gave him above average dexterity and constitution because he is a warrior type, and decided his weakness with the 8 is going to be his wisdom. This low score also gives me a chance to develop Maximilian as a character. Oh, perhaps the reason he has such a low wisdom is because he is recently out of training and he doesn't have a whole lot of real world experience. Or maybe he's used to being a leader, but only from afar, which would explain his high charisma. Again, your character needs to be more than just stats on a page. Low stats are not necessarily a bad thing. You can use those numbers to develop your character as you make them. When you are putting your scores in, keep in mind that for the most part, only even numbers matter. That is to say, a character with a strength of 12 gains just as much benefit as a character with a strength of 13 because of ability modifiers. When you use your ability scores, as opposed to using the actual score, use the ability modifier for that score, which gets higher the higher the score is. So if you're using an online sheet, these modifiers should be calculated automatically for you. So for example, a 10 has a score of plus 0, a 11 or 12 would have a score of plus 1, a 13, 14 would have a or no, yeah, a 10 or 11 would be plus 0, a 12 or 13 would be plus 1, a 14, 15 would be plus 2, and so on and so forth. These sorts of things you will find in the player's handbook. If not, or if you're using an online sheet, this sort of thing will be automatically calculated for you. So, having a higher ability score is beneficial. It gives you a bonus compared to someone with a lower score, but it does not make or break an engagement. So while a character so if you have a character with say a 14 strength with a plus 2 modifier and a character with a 10 strength with a plus 0 modifier, the higher character will certainly win like an arm wrestling contest, but there are simply a variety of factors that may lead a weaker player to win. And this is represented in the golden rule, which is how you do stuff in Pathfinder. The golden rule is very simple. It is whenever you want to attempt some action that has some chance of failure, you roll 1d20, which is a single 20-sided die, and you add all relevant modifiers. For instance, let's say you wanted to break down a door. You would roll 1d20 and you would add your strength modifier. You'd compare this to the difficulty of the task at hand, which obviously depends on exactly what you're doing. For example, breaking through a simple wooden door might have a difficulty class, also known as a DC, of 13, while breaking a reinforced door might be a difficulty class of 18, or 20, or even higher. 90% of all rolls you will make in the game will follow this formula, which is rolling a 20-sided die, adding modifiers. Damage dice are slightly different, but if you're ever confused and don't know how to proceed or don't know how to interact with an action, you would roll 1d20, add your perception bonus or your strength bonus or whatever it is you are attempting to do. And that is how you accomplish the task. So let's use Maximilian here for as an example. So while exploring a dungeon, Maximilian comes to a door. The door looks old, it is sturdy, and while it might not be locked, let's say the wet mildew of the dungeon has caused it to become stuck. On an attempt to open the door, Maximilian says he is going to throw his entire body against the door in an attempt to open it. To do this, he is going to roll a strength check, which is 1d20 plus his strength modifier. Since his strength score is 15, he gets a plus 2 bonus onto this check. He rolls his d20, he gets a 15. Adding the plus 2, he announces his final total as 17. The actual dice on the actual number on the dice does not matter most of the time. Usually it's the final score. There's natural 20s, but that's a whole different ballgame. But you roll a 15, you add plus 2, you announce your final total as 17. The Game Master then looks at his notes and sees that door had a difficulty class of 16. And since Maximilian's check is higher than the difficulty class of the door, he succeeds at the issue. The GM will describe after Maximilian throws his body against the door will pop open, revealing the room beyond. Alrighty, so now on to step 2, which is determining your race and your class. So once you have your ability scores in, it is time to decide on what type of character you would like to play. This involves picking a race, such as human, elf, gnome, a half-orc. There are many races to choose from, and depending on your game master, there may be even additional races to pick from. Furthermore, each race has unique racial traits, which may offer small benefits to your character in various ways. Though, honestly, when picking your first race, I advise you to ignore literally all of that and simply pick what race you think looks awesomeness or fits your character concept the best, and you can just write this down in your character sheet under race. Racial traits do matter, and there are a few racial traits which are much more powerful than other racial traits. Though, to be honest, if you're the type of person who's worrying about min-maxing racial traits in a level 1 campaign, I think you're being a bit silly, to be honest. Once you figured out the race of your character, you take a look at the classes. There are 11 base classes ranging from Barbarian to Wizard, and each of them offering a unique playstyle. A high intelligence character may find themselves drawn to the wizarding arts, while a character with a high charisma may find the trait of a bard or a paladin more interesting. There are no restrictions on a character's class based off ability scores, but depending on your ability scores, you may find certain classes you play. You might find that certain classes play to your strength more than others' classes. But of course, you can play whatever class you want. Once you've decided on a class, you're going to write that down in your character sheet under class. So for Maximilian, we have decided he is going to be from a small country village. So we're just going to decide on human, right? Just being a human for simplicity. In addition, because he has a high strength and charisma score, there are a few classes that appeal to him, such as paladin, bard, or even perhaps even being a sorcerer. However, from what we've decided so far, he definitely seems like the strength sword swinging type. And while we want to play a good aligned character, maybe the lawful rigidity of being a paladin isn't for him. Obviously, also depending on your campaign, your GM may bar certain classes or often additional classes depending on the setting. For instance, if you're playing in a game like Dark Sun, where there are no deities, there's little arcane magic, but pretty much everyone is a psionic, your GM may not allow clerics and may restrict wizards, but may offer up new exciting psionic classes to play. And and obviously, when you're making a character, you always want to check with your GM for the specifics of what races and classes are common in that world. Step 3, race and class features. So once you've decided on your race and class, it's time to fill out what all these sorts of things mean. On your sheet, there should be a section dedicated to feats and class features and special abilities. This is where you mark down all your racial traits, all of your class features, and other stuff. For Mythweavers, it is right down here. Don't worry too much about knowing what all of these different traits mean. You just write them down here. We'll get back to them later. The only thing you should be worrying about right now is your racial ability modifiers. So all races modify your ability scores very slightly. Some allow you to pick a score to improve, while others simply improve or lower specific scores depending on your race. For instance, dwarves increase their constitution and wisdom score by 2, but all dwarves also lose -2 points of charisma. These are not temporary modifiers, these actually change the score. And this is how most races will work. They will grant bonuses to 2 scores and a penalty to a 3rd score, but there are, of course, exceptions. For class features, open the player's handbook or open the web page or the page on the class you picked back in step 2, and you're looking for a big table with rows and columns called table, your class. Or so table, barbarian, or table, sorcerer. This table is, in essence, going to be a giant summary for all the bonuses your class gets level by level. We'll use this full table later, but for now, take a look at the class features table and note down all the cool crap you get from being a level 1 character. Feel free to copy down just the name of the feature, a quick summary of the feature, or an entire paragraph. It's your character sheet. Again, don't worry too much about understanding what these things do right now. We'll get to filling in all the smaller details once we've got all the big stuff down. However, while every class is different, there is something consistent across all classes, which is weapon and armor proficiencies. This is, in effect, a list of all the weapons and types of armor that your character has learned to use and knows how to wield without penalty. The amount of weapons and armor granted here very much depends on your class. A fighter gains more proficiency than a wizard, for instance. Mark down your proficiencies like any other class feature, and it'll be important later on when you begin to equip your character. So, for instance, we decided Maximilian is a human, which is fairly easy to mark down. He gets an extra skill point every level, and he gets a +1 feat. Due to the adaptability of humans, we get to pick a single ability score and improve it by 2. So we could, for instance, knock that wisdom from a 8 up to a 10. We could knock his strength from 15 to 17. But since I decided Maximilian to be a versatile character, I decided to knock his dexterity from a 13 up to a 15. He is now just as agile as he is strong. For class features, the only thing we needed to mark down is that Maximilian gets a bonus feat this level. In addition, we marked down his weapon and armor proficiencies. As a fighter, Maximilian has been trained and drilled in the use of simple weapons, martial weapons, all types of armor, as well as all types of shields. It might be tempting to write down just everything under proficiency, but alas, despite our many hours of training, there are still some weapons that remain beyond our knowledge, such as a twin-bladed sword or a elven curve blade. But when we get to feats, we can gain proficiency in those things. So once we've got the feats down, it is time for step 4, which is filling in miscellaneous information. So it may seem strange for me to just start going over glossary stuff right now in the middle of the video, but I just want to go by a box-by-box explanation of what these boxes do and what information to put in them. So if, for instance, if you have a class feature that says gives you +4 AC in specific circumstances, I want you to understand what that means. Again, depending on exactly what sheet you're using, the exact location of these boxes will vary. In addition, if you see a box in your character sheet marked Dexterity Modifier or Wisdom Modifier, you put your relevant ability modifier into that box. Again, depending on which character template you're using, the sheet may automatically fill in those boxes, such as Mythweaver's right here, and save you the math for doing that. So right here at the top of your sheet is something marked HP or hit points. If you've played a video game before, you probably know what this does. They are the main thing standing between you and lying dead on the floor. If you run out, you will collapse to the ground and start bleeding out, which is bad. The amount of hit points your character has depends on your class, as well as your Constitution modifier. Every time you gain a level, you will roll your hit die and you will add your Constitution. Physically weak classes, such as wizards and sorcerers, will usually only use a d6. Characters of average physical stature, such as bards, clerics, druids, monks, and rogues, will use 1d8. Frontline warrior characters like paladins, fighters, and rangers will use 1d10, and the mighty barbarian uses the 1d12. However, in order to ensure that a terrible roll at level 1 does not leave you incredibly weak, all characters gain maximum hit points at level 1 from their hit die, as well as from their Constitution modifier. All other levels, you have to actually roll your hit die and take what number you roll. So, for example, as Maximilian here, he is a fighter. So, as a fighter, he uses 1d10. Since his Constitution score is 12, he has a 1 modifier, which means our hit die is 1d8 plus 1. Level 1, rather than rolling, we take the maximum roll of the die, which is a 10. Adding our con modifier means we start with 11 hit points at level 1. Below that, we have Armor Class, or AC. This will represent how hard it is for you to be hit by enemy attacks. Higher is better, with a 10 representing an unarmored human. Right now, on your character sheet, I imagine your armor class is probably hovering around 10, which the only thing that should be adding to it at this point is just your dexterity modifier. However, there are many, many things that can affect how hard you are to hit, from actual armor, to shields, to tough hide, various magical spells. You will find slots for each of them here. But for right now, you won't need to do anything here other than mark down your dexterity bonus. The reason there's so many boxes here on the Mythweaver sheet is because of typed bonuses. In essence, bonuses of the same type do not stack with each other. So, for example, you cannot wear armor underneath your armor. Or if you have a Ring of Force shield, that won't stack with an actual physical shield. In general, bonuses of the same type do not stack. You only benefit from the highest bonus. But bonuses of different types do stack. So, for example, if you are encased in plate armor, you are carrying a shield, you are wearing an amulet of natural armor, and you are blessed by a Barkskin spell, you could conceivably benefit from the plate armor, the shield, and the spell, but not the amulet because the amulet gives you a natural armor bonus, and the barkskin bonus gives you a natural armor bonus. But since the spell is giving you a bigger bonus, that is the one you apply. Make sure you check in with your local mage or druid to find out what type of armor class bonus their spells are providing before you stride confidently into danger. There are 3 types of armor class. There's your regular old AC, and then you have your touch AC and your flat-footed AC. Because sometimes you don't get to apply your full armor class against an attack. When surprised, you may not have time to dodge, and thus you are unable to add your dexterity modifier to AC. This is called being flat-footed. Alternatively, you may find yourself in the opposite situation, such as where your physical armor proves useless and only your ability to dodge matters, such as if you're fighting spellcasters or ghosts or people with guns. This is referred to as your touch AC, since all the foe requires is to touch you. Your Dungeon Master will let you know if an attack you are subject to goes against regular AC, touch AC, or flat-footed AC, depending on the circumstances. There is another number here, which is CMD, which is Combat Maneuver Defense. This is, in essence, your armor class against anything that isn't a sword blade. If someone is attempting to grab you, wrestle you, shove you, trip you, it goes against your CMD instead of AC. Your CMD otherwise works exactly the same way. The way you calculate this, it is 10 plus base attack bonus plus strength modifier plus dexterity modifier. My sheet also has another number here called FCMD, which is literally just flat-footed CMD. So if someone's trying to grab you when you're not looking, flat-footed CMD. INIT, initiative. When you get into combat, you will roll initiative to determine the order people act on their turns. For most characters, your initiative modifier is just going to be your dexterity modifier, and determines where you go once combat goes turn-based. Caster level. Your caster level determines how powerful your spells are, and is represented by the amount of levels you have in a particular spellcasting class, such as Bard or Wizard. If you are not a spellcaster, you don't have a caster level. Speed. Your speed represents how fast you are. Usually this is 30 feet, which is 6 squares on a grid for most medium creatures, and 20 feet, which is only 4 squares on the grid for small creatures, though exceptions exist. And wearing exceptionally heavy armor or carrying around a heavy load can lower your speed. Below that, we get onto saving throws. So there are 3 types of saving throws in the game. There is Fortitude, there is Reflex, and there is Will. Each of these represent your ability to resist or avoid bad things happening to you. Fortitude saves represent poisons and physical pain. Reflex saves represent your ability to avoid pits and fireballs. And Will saves are your ability to resist mental attacks, such as mind control. Your total bonus to your saving throws depends partially on your class as well as your ability scores. Again, check table : your class for your base saving throws, and you can mark them down along with your relative ability score modifiers. Then you add them together and get your total saving throw bonus. So for Maximilian here, as a level 1 fighter, we have a base fortitude save bonus of +2, which is no others. We check our ability scores. We notice we have +1 to Constitution, we have +2 to our newly improved Dexterity score, and -1 to Wisdom. So adding them together with our base saves means we have +3 on Fortitude saves, a +2 bonus on Reflex saves, and a -1 penalty on Will saves. Then we get on to melee and base attack bonus. So, as I described before, if you want to attempt an action, it is 1d20 plus modifiers. The main modifier, if you want to hit something, is your base attack bonus. So if you're making a melee attack, your formula is 1d20 plus base attack bonus plus your strength modifier. Exactly the same for ranged attacks. It is base attack bonus plus dexterity modifier. Your base attack bonus is a number that goes up at a different rate depending on your class. So fighters and barbarians will get base attack bonus +1 every single level. Other classes will gain base attack bonus at a slower rate depending on their class. Again, check table your class for more information. Once you've got that done and you've got all your special abilities marked down, it is time to go down to the skills column. It is time to tackle skills. Skills are basically a list of things that your character is good at. You get a number of skill points each time you level, depending on your class and intelligence modifier, and you can spend them however you like. Certain races and classes may grant bonuses to particular skills. So if you have a racial trait giving you a bonus, such as an Elven's bonus to perception, you can mark that down here under the miscellaneous column. Your bonus to a skill is equal to the number of ranks you put in the skill, plus the skill's relevant ability modifier, plus any miscellaneous bonuses, plus the class skill bonus. So what are class skills? You may have noticed on table : your class a list of class skills. These are skills that, due to your character's background and training, they have a natural aptitude for. As a result, the first time you put a rank in a skill that is a class skill for your character, you get a free one-time +3 bonus to that skill. The bonus applies only the first time you put a rank in that skill. Apart from this one bonus, there is no difference between a class skill and a non-class skill. Well, at level 1, this +3 bonus does seem like a lot. It does even out over time. So, for example, if you're a fighter who puts 12 ranks and use magic device, you'll have +12. If you're a sorcerer and you do the exact same thing, you'll have +15. In essence, class skills exist to give suggestions as to things that people might expect your character to be good at, but you are by no means restricted to just your class skills. Finally, when you're spending skill points, keep in mind you can only put a number of ranks in a skill equal to your level. Or to put it another way, you can only spend a single skill rank per skill at this level. So for Maximilian skills, when we went to go spend our skill points, first thing we had to do is we had to check our class features. Fighters gain 2 plus intelligence modifier skills per level. Since Maximilian has an intelligence of 10, he gains no bonus skill points from that. But we decided he was a human, and one of the racial traits of humans is we get +1 skill point per level, giving us 3 skill points to play with right now. We decided to mark down our class skills, and we decided to find out what 3 skills are we going to put 1 rank into. So, we're a warrior. We decide we want to have at least a little bit of social mobility. And so we're going to put our first skill point in Intimidate to represent us getting real tough to get what we want. We spend our 1 rank, we add our +2 Charisma modifier, and since Intimidate is a class skill, we can also add in the +3, giving us a total bonus of +6 to our Intimidate checks. However, because we don't want to play a horrifically scary person, we're going to spend our next skill point on Diplomacy. Diplomacy is not a class skill for fighters, sadly, but we do still have our Charisma bonus, which will give us a total of +3 on Diplomacy checks. Finally, wishing to have some actual physical skills to go along with our talking, we are going to spend our final skill point on Survival. Since this is a class skill, we once again gain our +3, but since our survival is based off of wisdom, that does give us a slight penalty. Adding everything together, we have +1 from the rank, -1 from the wisdom modifier, +3 from the class skill bonus, giving us a total mod of +3 to our survival checks. Alrighty, and now we move back up here for step 6, which is feats. So unlike skills, which are things that pretty much any character can master, given enough time and training, feats are special. Feats are things that only a select few people have learned to master, and knowing a feat puts you in a much more exclusive club. Skills can be taught, but feats are learned through life experience. And while you may receive dozens of skill points through your character's life, you may only receive a scant few feats, so pick them wisely. All characters receive a single feat at level 1, and you gain a new one every odd level, though certain things may grant you bonus feats. Feats offer a variety of benefits for your character, from simple bonuses to, pardon the term, feats of might that were otherwise impossible for your character to perform, or perhaps even entirely new weapon or armor proficiencies. Some feats, like improved initiative and toughness, are valuable to all characters, while other feats are more specialized. Some feats require prerequisites to qualify for them, such as a high base attack bonus, ability scores, or possibly other feats. So there are certain feats like two-weapon fighting that open up entirely new playstyles. Pick the feats that you think fit what your character is capable of doing, and fit your vision of the hero that you are building. So, for example, we're going to use Maximilian as another example, and we're actually in a very privileged position when it comes to feats. Not only do we get a bonus feat from being a human, we are actually entitled to a third feat, because level 1 fighter gives us a bonus feat. However, being a fighter, this third feat has to be a combat feat, which is a smaller subject of feats. So we're going to pick that one first. So we open up our list of feats in our player's handbook, and Maximilian is immediately overwhelmed by choice. There are hundreds of feats in the game, and depending on which books your dungeon master allowed, there might be several thousand. However, for your first character, I suggest sticking to just the basic player's handbook feats, which is what I'm going to do here. So, the first feat that a fledgling fighter might want to take is a feat like Weapon Focus, which simply gives us a bonus to hit with a particular type of weapon. We first look at the requirements for Weapon Focus, which requires proficiency with a specific weapon and a base attack bonus of +1 or higher. Since we meet those requirements, we can take Weapon Focused Longsword for our first feat, because we're probably going to be using a longsword for most of our life. Since this meets the combat feat requirement, we can write that down. We can on our feat table, we can simply write down Weapon Focus. We can write down a short description of how it works, or we can write down the full text of the feat. It is entirely up to us how we want to write this down in our character sheet. However, we also decided we wanted to make a versatile character, and since our first feat helped with our melee abilities, for our second feat, let's pick a archery feat and spread out a bit. So we decided to pick for our second feat point blank shot. Since our second feat can be anything, it doesn't really matter that point blank shot is also a combat feat, so we can mark down point blank shot as our second feat choice. Finally, we get one more feat due to being human. So we could make a character entirely focused on combat, but since we did put a skill point in survival, and we want our character to maybe be a bit of an outdoorsy type, we decide our third feat is going to be endurance, because we think being able to survive in the wilderness, sleep in heavier armor, and be good at going through forced marches, that might fit our outdoorsy character we're trying to build here. So we're going to mark down endurance as our third feat. Step 7. We are now on equipment and gear. So at this point, your sheet is basically finished. However, since it is unwise to go directly into battle just completely nude, unless you're playing a monk, and even then a bit of clothing never hurt anybody, the final step to creating a character is buying equipment. Each character is given a stipend of gold pieces, also known as GP, in order to buy the equipment that they will start the game with. There are many ways to determine starting wealth, but the simplest option is simply rolling the dice. The size of dice you roll depends on your class, with classes like monks rolling the smallest dice, while classes like fighter and paladin getting the largest. While the wealth difference may seem large at first, it quickly evens out as you gain levels, and simply present because buying swords and heavy armor usually costs more than simple clothing. Or perhaps your dungeon master might just be giving 100 gold to every single person. Depends on the game you're running. Once you determine the amount of money your character is going to be starting the game with, it is time to spend it. A good rule of thumb when you are buying equipment out of the player's handbook is to buy at least one melee weapon, one ranged weapon, and a set of armor your character is proficient in. Keep in mind, however, your character is not simply just walking into a store, throwing down a massive bag of gold and buying things. Rather, this gold represents all the things your character has bought up to that point in their life. Perhaps they have a weapon passed down to them from their parents. Or perhaps this buckler they use is something they stole from a passing knight. You don't need to come up with the exact reason that your character possesses each and every item in their possession. Like, who does that in the real world? But knowing why, for instance, that your character uses a rapier as their main weapon, as opposed to a more traditional longsword, can add a lot of personality to a character for very little effort. Most character sheets, including the Mythweaver's one I'm currently using, will have a specialized area where you can mark down your melee attack bonus and your weapons along with their statistics. The total attack bonus of your weapon is the main number you add to your 1d20 roll when you are making an attack with that weapon. It is usually the same as your regular attack bonus. However, there are a wide variety of factors that can affect this. Perhaps you picked a feat that allows you to specialize in a particular weapon. Perhaps you're wielding a well-made or even magical weapon that could grant you a bonus to hit, but only for that specific weapon. That is where you'd mark it down here. Weapons, when you're marking them down, have 5 main stats that you care about. The first thing is obviously the damage die, which is how much damage the weapon deals. There is the critical threat range, which is how likely it is for the weapon to score a critical hit. The critical multiplier of the weapon, which is how much damage it does do if it manages to score a crit, as well as the range of the weapon and the type of damage it does. Right now, however, the only thing I'm going to be worrying about is damage die itself. So, a melee weapon deals damage depending on the weapon's damage die, or dice in the case of some weapons, plus your strength modifier. If you decide to use a weapon in 2 hands, you get 1.5 times your strength modifier. Thrown weapons will add your strength bonus to damage, but crossbows do not. Short bows and longbows usually don't add your strength bonus to damage. However, you can make them specifically made in order to do so. So, using Maximilian as an example, Maximilian here, as a fighter, he starts with a very large stipend of gold, which is 175 gold. Looking back at our proficiency, we remembered we're proficient with every single simple and martial weapon, as well as all armor and shields. Since we picked weapon-focused longsword as one of our feats, we decide our first weapon is going to be a longsword. So we subtract the 15 gold necessary to purchase that longsword off our sheet, leaving with 160 gold remaining. We go up to the weapons section on our character sheet, and we write in longsword. For our total attack bonus, it is our base attack bonus plus our strength bonus. We receive +1 to hit from longswords, thanks to that feat we took. And so our total bonus to hit is our base attack bonus, which is 1, our strength bonus, which is 2, and our feat, which is 1. So we have a total of +4 to hit with this longsword. Our damage with our longsword is 1d8, which is the base damage of a longsword, +2, which is from our strength modifier. Though if we chose to use our weapon two-handed, we could obviously bump that up to 1d8 +3. For ranged attacks, we have decided to pick up a short bow, which again, we are going to subtract the 35 gold necessary to purchase the short bow. While we could definitely spend more to purchase a composite short bow, which would possibly allow us to add our strength bonus to damage, we decide to hold off. We're going to hold off on that for now, just to conserve money for armor and other items. Again, our bonus to hit with our short bow is base attack bonus plus dexterity modifier, which in this case is +3. We are now left with 125 gold pieces left. When buying armor, it helps to think of armor as a trade-off between protection and mobility. The heavier the armor, the less likely you are to be hit, but medium and heavy armor slows your character's move speed down. In addition, the heavier the armor, the larger the armor check penalty the armor will bestow on any physical skills, such as climbing and swimming, that your character chooses to perform. Despite this, however, I always usually recommend wearing the heaviest armor your character can afford and is proficient in. Why? Especially at lower levels, characters can be very fragile, and the difference between life and death for certain characters, especially those with low con scores, can just be a handful of hit points. In addition, until you get to the very heavy armors, the penalties you take aren't usually all that bad. For instance, if you are wearing a breastplate, which is the heaviest and most expensive medium armor, which is a huge +6 to your armor class, it only gives you a -4 armor check penalty, and also allows for a maximum dex bonus of 3, which means even if you've got like 17 dexterity, you're still fine, assuming you're proficient. All right, so with our 125 gold left, Maximilian looks at his options. While we are not really able to afford the super expensive armor, a set of scale mail would cost a mere 50 gold, though it does come with the -4 armor check penalty and a 20-foot move speed. Alternatively, we could decide to purchase a chain shirt, which is more expensive at 100 gold and is less protective than the scale mail. However, it only gives us a -2 armor check penalty and allows us to keep our full 30-foot move speed. And obviously, since our dexterity bonus is +2, the fact that its max dex bonus of our scale mail is +3, that's a non-factor for us. And ultimately, for Maximilian, I decided to go for the much more economical option, and we spent the 50 gold on the scale mail. We note down its stats. Its armor bonus is +5. Its armor check penalty is -4. Its max dex bonus of +3, and the fact it weighs 30 pounds. This leaves us with 75 gold left. In addition, since a longsword is one-handed, and because we have proficiency, we may decide to look at shields. There are 4 types of shields, all of which Maximilian is proficient in. We have bucklers, which simply strap to our arm and allow full use of our offhand. We have light shields, which are slightly more cumbersome and allow everything except for weapon use. We have heavy shields, which offer more protection but do not allow your hand to be used for anything else. And tower shields, which offer a truly massive amount of protection, but are pretty large and unwieldy even if you're proficient with them. Currently, our armor class is sitting at 17. We've got 10 from our base, we've got 5 from our armor, and we've got 2 from our dex. So picking up a light shield would improve it to 18, a heavy shield to 19, and a tower shield would boost our AC up all the way up to 21. And since we don't really think Maximilian's going to be a 2-weapon dual-willy type of character, I decided to pick up the middle of the road option, which was a heavy shield. When you're buying a shield, you can always decide what it's made out of, wood or metal. Uh, at first, the distinction is mostly cosmetic, and to some degree it is. However, there are certain spells out there that affect material, such as, say, dealing with a spellcaster casting warp wood or heat metal. However, we're trying to save money here, and a wooden shield is cheaper, so we can pick up a wooden heavy shield for a measly 7 gold, which will now leave us with 68 gold left to buy goods and services. So now that we got our weapon and armor in hand, the last thing on our shopping cart ought to be goods and services. This table lists all of the miscellaneous supplies you may need on your adventure, from rope to lamp oil to trail rations. These items do not affect your character's combat ability in any way and are obviously entirely optional. However, even though they may not offer any bonuses to damage or armor, that does not make them useless. Far from it, in fact. In my years dungeon mastering, I have seen pretty much every single item on the goods and services page either make or break a character, or in some cases, save a character's life when used correctly, or perhaps with a bit of creativity. Ultimately, it is up to you and your own judgment call as to what you want to buy, but a small kit of tools never hurt anybody. Things such as backpacks, torches, trail rations, water skins, maybe a change of clothing. In addition, check with your dungeon master for additional mundane items if you wish to buy something that isn't necessarily listed here, like, for instance, a bear trap. They may have additional mundane items for sale beyond what's listed in the player's handbook. Also, if you are playing a low strength character, you should keep in mind your carrying capacity. Uh, Assuming you have a high enough strength score, or if you're going to be using medium or heavy armor, it is not entirely necessary to keep track of exactly how much every single item weighs, but if you're going to be traveling light, it pays to keep in mind what you'll be carrying, especially if you're going to be carrying multiples of the same item, like a week's worth of trail rations or a bundle of javelins. The weight can add up real quickly. In addition, while RPGs tend to have a reputation of allowing characters to carry literally anything up to their weight limit, uh, keep in mind that might look a bit weird to most people. Would you trust someone who walked unguarded through a rural peasant town with like a sword, an axe, and like 5 different throwing axes? That being said, if you're playing like a mercenary or a monster hunter, maybe it makes sense for you to just be carrying crap tons of crap. Ultimately, it is your call how much is too much. Though, as a rule of thumb, if you're carrying more than like 4 or 5 weapons, that's probably pushing it. And that's it. Once you've bought your character sheet, or once you've bought your equipment, that is it here for Maximilian. There is, of course, additional nonsense that goes into when you are buying spells or you are pulling out a spell book, though I imagine I'm going to probably throw that in as a second video after this, as this one's probably pretty long as is. Final checklist. Your ability scores are all they did, as you put in the relevant ability modifier. You have all your numbers placed where they need to be, like hit points, base saving throw, ability scores, base attack bonus. Do you have all your class and racial features written down? Do you understand what they do? And do you have all your miscellaneous skill bonuses plugged in? Have you plugged in all your skill points and added up the totals? Have you picked your feats and added their bonuses? And have you bought your weapons and armor? Congrats! You just made a Pathfinder RPG character. Well, I won't say it was easy. Probably learned a shitload along the way. Assuming you or I haven't missed anything, you should now have a perfectly legal character to take to your local friendly gaming store, or perhaps just your buddy's game. Though do keep in mind there is more to Pathfinder than simply numbers on a character sheet. I have referenced a whole bunch of stuff like critical threats and probably attacks of opportunity and initiative that are not integral to understanding Pathfinder. Uh, or if there are integral to understanding Pathfinder, but you don't really need to know what an attack of opportunity is to make a character sheet. If you'd like to learn about that, feel free to let me know, and I'll release a follow-up to this explaining what combat is. Awesome. Have a good day.